It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I have the pleasure of having Stephanie Rodin on today. Stephanie is the founder and principal of Rodin Legal PC and has been practicing law since 1998, just a few years actually then. Her majority of the time and her niche market has been assisting healthcare practitioners. And I found it fascinating as I've gotten to know Stephanie over the years of really understanding and how she helps this specific field. Stephanie, thank you for joining me here today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, I have to ask how, many attorneys, we know many attorneys out there, healthcare. I don't know if I've ever met anybody other than you that is just niche down in healthcare. How did it start and why healthcare?
Well, it was a weird path. It wasn't something that I had wanted to do specifically when I was in law school. I come from a family of doctors and dentists, and I never wanted to be one of them. And so my goal was always to get away from medicine. And so when I went to law school, I figured I would do something in business. But while in law school, I kept getting these assignments that always had something to do with medical, whether it was the article that I was writing for Law Review, whether it was clerking for a judge who was doing medical malpractice. And it just sort of turned out that I just started doing more and more work. And so when I moved back to New York, one of the first jobs I was doing was malpractice work for, physicians and dentists. And I found it incredibly interesting and just how the law works around it and what the rules were, especially for plaintiffs who were bringing claims against their physicians or dentists, if they had damages based upon the procedures. And, I worked with the plaintiff side for a little bit, got the experience to know how they bring their cases. And then I very quickly turned to the defense side because, being my family was all in medical and dental, they didn't really like the fact that I was in the plaintiff work. So I turned over to the defense side. And I overall did that for about, 8 to 10 years or so. And, I was doing the litigation and I really understood the practices and I started to really understand, what goes on outside of the treatment, as far as the consent forms, setting up the practices, the employees versus the independent contractors, what documents they had in place, even including the commercial leases. And after doing the litigation for so long, I got a little burned out, honestly, just with everything. And I decided to open up my own firm. And that's sort of what got me, 12 years ago when I opened it up, where I started with healthcare, because my entire experience, including my childhood, was always with healthcare. And it just made the most sense. And it was the most knowledge I had because of the experience that I had previously.
No, I mean, I get it and it makes sense. So I guess then I think about as I do, and those listeners who have been listening, to Her Success Story for a while, you're like, oh, I know where Ivy's going with this. And for those who are new here, welcome and see, is okay. So in building out a practice, some of the most common things attorneys do is they get out and network. Do you go to a hospital with like a stack of like, how do you start networking? In healthcare, is it different? What is it? Because, and I ask this because sometimes people will say, well, I have this niche market, but you're going to do this differently.
So, truth be told, when I opened up my own practice, I really had no idea how I was going to get my clients. It was a free for all. And I fortunately had met a number of women who owned their own businesses. And they invited me to certain networking groups. And I would say for the first 3 years, I networked every day and sat in front of anyone who was willing to listen to me talk about my firm and what I did. It didn't matter what they were in. Like I really had, I had like 4 or 5 meetings almost every day with different people. And I
Wow.
just, I really,
So in
I
the olden days, we would say, so you really hit the pavement in
exactly,
New York.
exactly. And, through time and, fortunately, I ended up in front of people who, really helped. And they would then invite me to go lecture with them in front of residents at hospitals about their first employment agreement and what they need to look for. And that started. And then as I started to do more of those, I started getting, requests to go into different hospitals and different departments with different specialties. I started to get requests to do continuing legal education courses about employment agreements, purchase agreements. I started lecturing, sort of consistently every year in front of certain, dental departments or what have you. And, by doing all that, my name started to get out, and as I started to do that, I became much more selective in the networking. And then I only wanted to be around people who predominantly worked with healthcare practitioners. So it wasn't then meeting anyone who was going to listen to me. It became much more selective, and that happens through time, and it just started to grow naturally from that. So, I mean, it was, like I said, it really was a free for all in the beginning. It really was. And then I learned, in time of where my services were most needed and where I could speak and who I should speak to that would generate the buzz about me and my practice and to get those leads for clients.
So speaking of speaking, do you do much speaking today? And if so, what kind of speaking would you look for and do?
So since COVID, it's been a little bit
oh, we mean we're in a pandemic?
So, before I would do a lot in person, obviously since COVID, a lot of it is now Zoom. I have, like I said earlier, I have like standing organizations that I work with, whether it's the NYU Dental School to talk about risk management, which I do every summer, and I'm fortunate to do that. But now I try to look for areas that I can speak, whether it's, contacting a specific organization for, dermatologists or plastic surgeons or orthopedics and trying to, get in their meetings so I can give something. I have had a lot of clients come to me through Facebook groups, and I have reached out to certain people and they've invited me to speak about contracts through the Facebook group. So, which has been amazing. And I really just try to see the best places for me to do it. I mean, what I love most about what I do is educating people on what they need to know. And I love doing that. So anyone who's willing, again, to listen to it or has an interest in it or can benefit from it in some way, I would love to just get in front of them and do it. So for me, it's more of just reaching out to different types of organizations or groups or continuing legal education, or, could be continuing dental education or medical education, just to see, where I can get the most people to listen so that they can learn something new that they're not really taught in their education for what they do.
And that happens to be so true. It's so true. We if you go to medical school, you go to law school, you go to so many different areas in education, you learn specifically your trade. And there's so much else to that trade as you run a business that you don't know.
Right.
There
are many times where like a client will contact me because let's just say they're buying a practice. And one of the first things that they'll say to me on the phone is, I have no idea what I'm doing. So every question that I'm going to ask you, you're probably going to think is ridiculous. And I've had a number of clients tell me this. Now, to me, as the old saying goes, there is no stupid question, because if you don't understand something, then it's not a stupid question, right? And I'm absolutely fine in explaining everything and going step by step and making sure that they understand, the process from start to finish. But there are some clients that do understand that they don't know anything when it comes to the business management, which is what I concentrate on. My goal ever since I opened up my practice has been to work with as many, practitioners as possible to make sure that they're protected on the legal side and the management side so that they can just focus on the care, which is what they went to school for and what they enjoy and what they're good at. So this way they don't have to worry about all the potential legal issues or patient issues or the fact that they don't have the right forms or they're not treating someone the right way. I focus on that part of it. And that's always been my goal, is to just provide that protection as much as possible.
So I have to ask, because, we all, not everybody likes to talk about the challenges they have had. And you've been in practice for how long now?
Almost 12 years.
Okay. So you've done this almost a dozen years. What have been some of the challenges you've navigated, and how have you navigated them?
In the beginning, the biggest challenge was getting clients. I mean, I was hungry and I had no idea where the next, payment was going to come from. And I was living, payment to payment, and it was really difficult. And I just kept telling myself, just keep doing what you're doing. It'll come. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't give up. Just keep striving for whatever that goal was at the time. And so as I pushed myself through and having those 4 or 5 meetings and sitting down with everyone, I eventually met people and got my name out enough where the clients started to come in. That was the first challenge. The second challenge I found was keeping up with those referrals and the work to make sure that they still think of me top of mind. And that's when social media started to come a little bit more. And for anyone who knows me, I do not like social media. I don't post things regularly on a personal side. It was very difficult for me to break that barrier on the business side. And I started with, a blog. So it wasn't even me talking. It wasn't anything. And I did that for a number of years, and I still do it. And then with COVID, the next challenge was I wasn't seeing anyone in person. So how do I continue to market myself while still working and keeping up with the referrals and keeping up with the client work? And that's when I started, thinking about my own podcast and doing more lectures Zoom wise. And that's difficult for me because I don't like seeing myself and I don't like hearing myself. And I know a lot of people have this because I've had numerous discussions with them. And so there was the challenge of that in order to promote my practice to that next level and making sure that other people get it. And now I've done a number of interviews for my podcast and I absolutely love it. So there was that, which is great. And now one of the challenges is about the growth of my practice. In the 12 years, it has significantly grown, and understanding where the next growth is going to be and how I can get there, and hiring the right people and making sure I have the proper foundation and the people with me, whether they're employees, whether they're contractors, or whether they're just the surrounding referrals, to make sure that I'm continually to grow and learn and create the type of firm that I've, have always wanted, which continues to change as I hit those certain goal points. So it's always a moving target, but every step has been challenging because it has always pushed me to something that I was never comfortable with.
And I got to jump in here because you're right. It is always a moving target, because as we achieve something, we have a vision at the beginning and we start moving towards it. And then we start achieving things. And sometimes that vision could shift or adjust, and hence the moving target referral, yet you're still growing. And the one thing, as I've known you over the years, you never back down when things are uncomfortable.
No, I sort of like it, which is really odd to say because it pushes me. I've never been a quitter ever in anything that I've done. And I've always strive to be the best person that I can. And I always look at it where, I'm better today than I was yesterday. And every day I'm going to be a better version of myself because of the people that I interact with, because of the things that I do, because of the work that I do. And in that sense, I'm always learning. Like, to me, it's all about how much knowledge I can actually attain every day so that I can do something different the next day. Like, when I opened up my practice, truth be told, I mean, I had a very limited vision over the type of work that I was going to be doing. And then I ended up taking a number of CLE classes. I looked at and did all of these courses and read books so that I had a better understanding of the different types of agreements and issues that may come up as I started working with clients. And that has grown into something that I never even imagined 12 years ago. I mean, even during COVID, I started doing things as far as writing policies about COVID. I never could have imagined that I would have been doing something like that. First off, having a pandemic was, not something I ever imagined, but, taking it in a way to help my clients to make sure that they were protected with this ever-changing law and rules with COVID, because it's constantly moving.
There's that moving target again.
And, I've adapted in a way that has helped the practice and my clients so that there is that constant growth to get there. Mm-hmm. And it's the challenges keep me going. And I truly just love it. I mean, I really do love what I do. And it's just great.
So what has surprised you in this journey?
That's a hard question. I think my persistence in trying to help in any way that I possibly can. There's many times, and this by knowing me through the years, that, I'm not necessarily just about the bottom line. It's more of the human interaction and relationships. And by that, it's challenging to be there for your clients as much as possible, and there's only so much time in any day to do anything. And I think it's just helped me be a better person overall, to work with them, to work with my clients, to understand them. And the more clients I work with and the more matters that I take on, and as much as my firm has grown and will continue to grow in the future, I know that my clients are the ones that help me get there. And without them, obviously my firm wouldn't exist, but I also wouldn't have any of the knowledge that I have. Like, they teach me just as much as I educate them on the process of the different types of practices that they have, of the different ideas that they have, of where they want to go with their practice is probably completely different from a colleague of theirs, and understanding those differences and possibly those disparities, and, creating the contracts to help that and to protect them based upon what they're telling me it's just an amazing process to me to help my clients, and yet to see these different variations that, in the end, it's all about the protection, but they're all different. There's not one single contract that's the same. And I love that individuality of it. I really do. And every case is different. And when I was doing the defense side for as long as I was, although they were different cases, it was always the same concept. And I think there was a sense for me of a boredom. I'm never bored with what I do now, because it's constantly changing and growing and alternating, and it's all because of the clients. And I have my clients to thank as a result.
So I have to say, when we were prepping, my team and I were prepping for the interview today, one of my team members was like, do you follow Stephanie on social media? And I was like, yeah, of course I do, And she's like, I love her social media. I said, tell me, what do you love about it? She's like, she's really into music and the theater. And, how do you find the engagement on social media? And actually, one of the things that I adore about following you is your transparency of who you are as a human being. How does that impact when you're networking with people and doing the daily work of growing a business?
So, as everyone needs an outlet. My outlet has always been Broadway and music. I listen to music when I work. I need music around me all the time. And I wouldn't be able to live without music. And anyone who knows me knows this. When, as I indicated earlier, social media was not an easy thing for me. And so by taking something that I love and putting it out there to create something interesting for me, I was hoping it would show some interest for others and to give something that, is not your typical just business square type of thing. Lawyers, there are industries that have reputations, but lawyers have reputations of being a little on the square side, I think, as a whole. Obviously, we're always going to have.
Well, I don't want to, I adore my attorneys, right. But like people like, do you find them boring? Do you find them interesting? It's like, why attorneys? Doesn't that bore? It's like, no, it's so much fun. But that's why I do hear what you're saying exactly.
So I wanted to put something out there that, people can see something that I enjoy. So it breaks up the day for me. Like, going online and finding even a weird law of something that I have nothing to do with. Like I recently posted about a law in Vermont that women, which is still on the books, that women have to get permission from their husbands in order to get fake teeth before they go to a dentist. And they have to actually show proof to the dentist that they got permission from the husband. Now, this is a law that's been on the books since 1856. So obviously it's not used, but the fact that it's still in existence to me is just so interesting and funny. So if I find something that I think is interesting because I'm like, wow, I didn't know that, I want to try to get it out there so that other people can see it and understands just complexities of our world. When it comes to music trivia, obviously there's no question of how much I love that. And, just seeing what else is out there and just trying to break up the day so it's not so monotonous and it's not just so business. And, I don't think of it as promoting. I don't think of it as networking because I love the topics. So for me, it's just sharing something that I love and hoping that maybe someone will see it. Maybe someone will comment. Maybe someone will enjoy it. Maybe someone will start doing something like that on their own. And if I can give even that little bit of pleasure to someone else, makes me happy.
I love that. And, as we wrap up, any tips and advice for somebody who is thinking of going out on their own, starting their own practice? What do they need? Any tips or advice from that?
For anyone who's starting or, regardless of how long they've been out, whether they've been working at other practices or not, the one thing that you have to have is not just courage, but determination and not to let anything falter for you. You can't give up. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be a reason to look and say, maybe I shouldn't do this. I'm not getting the results that I wanted. I'm not getting the clients that I wanted. If I thought that way, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And you really need to just, if it's something that you want, you will get it. You just have to put the time in. And you just have to be religious and consistent with exactly what you're doing. And it all comes out in the end. And I truly believe that because it's what happened to me. I've heard stories from other colleagues. You just can't give up. No matter how difficult, you just can't give up. And it'll turn around. You just have to give it time.
So how can our listeners know more about you and stay in touch?
Anyone can follow me on my social media platforms on LinkedIn, which is just my name at Stephanie Rodin. I recently started a new podcast called Speaking with Steph. So anyone can chime in on that. It's it's twice a month, one with me just talking, another one with an interview with someone else to sort of highlight them or something fun. The podcast that came out today was a top 5 concert list. So again, just doing
fun.
things that I love. Yeah. You can visit my website just to get more information about the firm. And, I'm always happy to talk to anyone and to help or guide anyone as much as possible.
Fabulous. Steph, thanks for joining us here today at Her Success Story. Viewers and listeners, stay tuned for more information on Her Success Story. Subscribe to Her Success Story. We come into your inbox every Monday morning with fresh new interviews and content. Based on what you listened to today, take a moment and think, what was the biggest takeaway for you? What resonated? Drop that in the comments below. For me, and it's always about that, it's Slater Success, my company. is not just about the takeaways, but what you're going to do about it. So what is the action you're committed to from listening and joining us here today? Thank you. We'll see you next time at Her Success Story.